Hey guys, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dhruv. I'm co-founder and CTO of Catalysis, and I'll be moderating this restaking panel. Let's get started. So let's start with quick intros.
And I'm Nick. I'm one of the founders at Mello, and we're building the institutional vault infrastructure, and we're also working with restaking.
Hi, my name is Philip. I'm a lead contributor at Inception LRT. We are a meta LRT provider on top of Symbiotic and Eigenlayer.
Hi, I'm Phil Vogel, the founder of Cork Protocol. We're building a protocol to allow anyone to price, trade, and hedge risks on-chain, starting with pegged assets like LRTs and stablecoins.
Hi, I'm Laurent. I'm from MEV Capital. We are a liquid fund acting in DeFi blockchain since 2020 and working with all the partners and protocols at this stage.
Hey, my name is Ilgis. I'm from Gearbox Protocol. Gearbox is lending protocol, so actually we onboard a lot of LRTs for leveraging and different use cases.
Awesome, like beautiful people in the panel. And I would like you guys to have spicy takes in this panel. Like this is mandatory. So let's get started. So as we all know, slashing is live on Symbiotic and Eigenlayer both on mainnet. How are you guys currently evaluating AVSs in terms of slashing? How are you assessing slashing logic in these AVSs?
Yeah, so on our end, basically, we have curated model in the system, and we don't assess the risk on our end. We delegate this to curators, and I think it's the best approach because you will have multiple different approaches to risk management. You'll have different risk profiles, and also I think that it's important to understand that restaking is basically it's insurance mechanism depending on slashing implementation. But in the most simple case where you have just slashing with burner, then it's something that punishes the entity. In other case, if it's slashing with a redistribution, it's exactly insurance. So in this case, you need to keep very low correlation between the risk profiles, and we're also going to provide more data to make decisions for LPs when they get into the vaults, and also provide more infrastructure for risk management for curators. We recently launched some things around interfaces for curation, and I think this is something that's important to have in the ecosystem. And yeah, and I think no restaking protocol can work without curation these days.
So Inception has a similar approach where we're not a protocol curator, so we delegate curation to independent curators such as risk managers or liquid funds that would like to be curators. One thing that I guess we offer on top of that is that we work with multiple curators. So you benefit also for some level of diversification of the slashing risk. And we actually also work with trusted curators that we know have on-chain risk mitigation mechanisms that might eventually pull out the capital if there is a slashing event that occurs to avoid correlation slashing risk and that kind of stuff. So there is a bit of enhanced benefits, I think, to work with multiple curated vaults instead of only one. If it is carefully selected, let's say by the DAO of our protocol when it becomes live.
So we're actually building out the market infrastructure to allow market participants to price the risk of slashing. And so that can come in a lot of different forms. In our initial implementation right now, we have depeg swaps, which allow the market to price the risk of a depeg on a pegged asset. So you can take an LRT or a vault or any token you want and create a market where you're actually pricing the risk of a depeg, which could come from a slashing event. As we move forward and down our technical roadmap, we actually plan to have the ability to price specific slashing events on an AVS or a network, and that will allow the market to continuously price and update what the costs are for ensuring that risk and actually allow the market to price, trade, and hedge it.
Okay, well, as a curator, and to add something smart that already been said, first, yeah, like Nick said, slashing in restaking is a function, okay, that someone trigger, okay, and you have either a punitive event, as Nick said, so one or a certain number of your 32 Ethereum get burned, or, as Nick said, could be redistributed. So here we can think of insurance, as already said. So in staking, long time ago, when it was just Lido, you know, or the vanilla staking, the risk of slashing came from the node validator, because they were either not, you know, like synchronized, or they have like a downtime, or they were simply like mischievous, you know. On the restaking side, the risk does not come from really the node operator, but the AVS, or the SSN itself. Or to be more specific, the risk comes from the way the middleware is designed, the AVS middleware is designed. So how do you trigger a slashing? Who has the right to trigger it? Who has the right to veto it? Is it a direct slashing? Does it have a resolver committee behind? Do you have 24 hours veto, etc.? So us as a curator, to sum up, is we look at the quality of the middleware of each underlying AVS we secure, and we make sure of the responsiveness, the communication between the node validator, the curator, and the SSN itself. I think it has been said like earlier on, the slashing is not something someone wants to, you know, rock pull us. It's mostly of the time an issue of communication or parameters. So at this stage, it's so experimental. We all working actually one by one, because each slashing mechanism is unique to its AVS. Some AVS doesn't even have slashing. Like EigenDA will never have any punishment slashing. Some, however, does. So that's why it's very hard right now to synthesize how to price the risk of slashing, because they're all pretty different. Yeah. And to finish here, I mean, node validator knows a lot about the slashing risk.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, each individual AVS or network is going to have its own level of looking at how you price the risk, because it could potentially be so different. And also what happens to the slash at that time is just, the spectrum is huge.
I guess in lending markets, it's a bit different angle for looking at slashing. As for pegged assets, mostly in lending markets use these fundamental or exchange oracles, which actually checks how much underlying has asset actually. And this underlying could be changed in case of slashing. So crucial part for us is withdrawal period, so that in case of different slashing things, if they happens, liquidators should be able to withdraw position. So how much it costs for them, how much time it takes for them. That's crucial part for us from lending perspective.
Yeah, I would also add one more thing, that right now we were speaking mostly about the risks from the LP side, but at the same time there are risks on the side of AVS or shared security network in terms of which other networks are utilizing the capital together with you, because if there will be significant slashing event coming from other network, then your security will also get affected. And it's also important to choose the capital providers and vaults and curators from the side of network, not just from the side of LP.
Amazing. I have multiple follow-up questions. So let's start one. If you had to choose one, will you burn the slashed assets or redistribute it?
I will definitely redistribute, because if you can redistribute, you can also burn. And but jokes aside, I think it's just a more powerful concept. And in this case, you can build more things that will work with traditional finance. And you can get much broader use cases with the insurance, repo, whatever. And in this case, it's something that covers much more capital.
Yeah, I don't have necessarily a super strong opinion about that. I think about the risk of where the concern of redistribution is not knowing how exactly it will be redistributed in case of a slashing event. Because if it's some small group member or some concentrated voters on some DAO that are going to decide about how this is going to be distributed, then how do you price the risk of slashing if you don't know what the tokens will be, how it will be handled after the slashing? So I think there is this part of uncertainty that, yeah, makes me not have a strong preference for both, options, unless if we dig a bit deeper.
I think it really varies, right? The use cases for AVSs and networks is enormous. And so what the actual use case of the slashing is also going to be really varied. And I think also one of the things that needs to be considered is if you're thinking about redistribution, who are you redistributing it to? And is it actually someone who is affected by the event? Again, depending on the network design or the AVS design. But one of the challenges that you have is that let's say you're securing an oracle and the oracle does something incorrect, and there are downstream effects of that. How do you actually get the redistribution to them? And is that redistribution anywhere near enough to cover the potential effects?
Yeah, but I think also with burning, it's another way of redistributing because it indirectly affects the price of the asset. And in this case, it's also redistribution, but in a different form. Yeah. So it's the way to redistribute to everyone who owns this asset.
Certainly, but I think let's say it actually causes liquidations to take place downstream because the oracle gave you a wrong price data, right? And then it turns out, oh, that price data was wrong. We wanted to redistribute to the people who got liquidated. Is that if they do, like if you're just burning it, you're sort of helping everyone, right? Not necessarily helping those specific people who were affected, but also like, is there enough of a redistribution? Even if you were able to target them and say, you are the ones who were affected by this. Here we have this stake, it's, X number of ETH or whatever that actually goes back to them, but no, they lost 10 times that. How do you actually compensate them for the fact that they didn't do anything wrong that should have gotten them liquidated?
I don't take this. Yeah, I mean, it's so early, and right now I was listening to you talking. It's like, okay, so you have one LRT, okay, that secured 10 AVS, let's say. Then one AVS have a successful slashing. So out of the, I don't know, 32 ETH, let's say we lose one. What will be the price of the LRT? I mean, this via Oracle, as you said, it will not be too difficult. I think the issue is not to price the LRT in a secondary market. No, the issue is how do you price the LRT at the primary market, at the vault, once you have an event of slashing that occurs. So far, so good. No slashing occurred. Primev, I think, is already activated. EigenDA is activated but doesn't have any slashing per se. So we are really at the beginning of a big journey here.
I mean, you're already starting to see some network and AVS designs that are intended to have a slashing, right? I've seen some design proposals where they're actually used to ensure reinsurance stakes. And so if there's
cap money is coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I think so if there is actually, in those events, you're going to have slashing. It's going to occur, and there's going to be like an actuary model that says this amount of it is actually intended to be slashed. And then I think you have a really interesting question of if you have an LRT that's allocating to that, how do they price themselves? Because at the end of the day, in the secondary market, fine, you're right, exactly, it'll take care of itself. But in the primary market, now they've been slashed, right? And they know they were going to be slashed. And so is there a way to build buffers and build other things such that that slash is almost accounted for? And so it's like, we know that on this particular allocation, we anticipate 4% being slashed in a year, but we're being paid 8%. And so therefore, we have a way of like compensating for that. So as long as we're being slashed at the amount that we think, it's always going to work out. It's if we get slashed more than that now you have another problem.
And as Nick mentioned, is that sometimes you can secure 10 AVS with one Ethereum. So if one of your AVS gets slashed, okay, what's happened to the security of the 9 others remaining AVS? This is really a question I would like to answer. I mean, I don't have the answer now, but Gauntlet did some analysis about that using some minimax model, which I think pretty smart, even though they're my competitor, but I'm happy to say.
Awesome. So let's take a case study of proof-of-stake networks. Historically, proof-of-stake networks have seen slashing due to misconfigurations, bugs in client configurations, but not actual malicious behavior. What do you think of misconfigurations across these different AVSs, since all these AVSs are built different and there's no standardization across the board?
Yeah, I think like it's also something in the angle of risk and yield profile, because the higher the risk, the higher the yield. If we look into Ethereum network, then in 2024 it was about 68 ETH burned during the whole year. It's a very small number compared to the amount of ETH that was staked. And the risk is super low. In case of AVSs, the risk is of course much higher, and there's different implementations for slashing and different implementations of AVSs. But at the same time, there are things like resolving committees which can mitigate at least some things where there is some errors in terms of the code, or some malicious misbehavior from the hackers or something like this, not from the side of designed mechanism. So I think that all the launches that activate slashing, they should have the resolving committee on the first stage or something like this implemented and integrated, because it's something that's very new, and we need some reputable entities that will like at least look into what's happening when there is the first slashing events coming, and after that it can be just removed as soon as we make sure that everything works fine.
Yeah, I think in terms of slashing, there is one part that is potentially different between proof-of-stake networks and shared security. Is the potential risk of correlation slashing. So there are certain type of slashes that will remain isolated in a specific SSN or network, but there are other type of slashes that might eventually have a causality that might trigger other slashes in other networks. So understanding that slashing correlation is something that is still very, very early. We don't really know, how it's going to happen. There are some curators that have those on-chain monitoring tools with hooks that will trigger out the liquidity if there is such an event occurring. But I feel like there is still a lot of uncertainty, and that's probably the main difference with proof-of-stake networks and shared security networks.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Especially when you're thinking about one single stake securing 10 AVS networks, that potentially if one server goes down or has an issue, and all of a sudden all 10 of those are slashing against the same stake, what does that do? We don't know, right? And I think that's going to be a really interesting thing to see how the market ultimately prices those risks and actually looks to prevent them from happening. We have a lot of track record in history on Ethereum and other large proof-of-stake network slashing. We have zero history on AVS as a network, so I think it's going to be a long time before we actually know exactly how this is going to work out.
I think it's also important that there's another layer of risks in this case, because if there is slashing event in the AVS that will slash some assets in the vault or LRT, in this case it also affects the secondary market, and there could be cascade liquidations on the lending markets and more things that will get affected in the DeFi ecosystem.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because it could end up being that you have temporary like depeg events that end up being caused by a slash event that's actually very, very small, but because everyone doesn't know what it means at the beginning, everyone sells in the secondary market, it causes mass liquidations, and then 20 minutes later, prices back up to being off by 10 basis points.
I have one point, us, MEV Capital, we don't put direct slashing. We put resolver committee, 24 hours. Why, Nick, did you say once everything is stable, let's put out a resolver committee and do direct slashing? I'm not sure I will feel always comfortable to keep direct slashing. I love my veto.
No, I think it makes sense like case by case, and it depends on the specific implementation of AVSs, and it depends on specific risk profile. So probably later at some point you would have several vaults, some vaults with direct slashing, some vaults that you will manage with resolving committee, depending also on requirements from the side of AVSs.
But what would be the negative path of running a vault with a veto?
With Veta still, there are some trust assumptions on the side of committee. So sometimes if you want very strong trust assumptions, and you're very confident in terms of the implementation, then in this case, most likely you won't have the veto committee.
But these AVSs are ever evolving software. And how will you remove resolving committee and enable direct slashing? Because these AVSs are evolving.
Yeah, but it's something that can be configured on the level of the vaults. So it's the case where it can be decided later, and you start with the veto and then you remove it.
Yeah, makes sense. Some vaults having direct slashing and some with resolver committees. Makes sense, makes sense. I want to divert this panel to node operator selection. As vault curators and LRTs, how do you guys select node operators for these AVSs? How do you assess node operators for a specific AVS?
Yeah, on our end as a protocol, we work with all the major node operators, and I think it's already dozens of node operators in our ecosystem, and curators are free to choose and work with any node operators. They can also bring more new node operators into the system, and also we have two types of vaults in this in that sense. We have vaults that work with multiple node operators, and we have node operator specific vaults. And in most cases, they're also the node operators are working with our curators to manage the vault, and it's the way for them to work directly with AVSs and keep more business on that side. And at the same time, it gives them more flexibility in terms of risk management. And curators help a lot because it's basically business of curator to manage the risk, and node operator provides all the infrastructure.
So as mentioned before, on inception level, we work with the curators. The curators select the node operators and the networks. However, to be able to select the curators, we need to understand what type of curation they're doing. So we built a risk-taking explorer for us, mainly for internal purposes, because we kind of need to understand what is the network exposure of the curator. Are they working with multiple node operators? Are they working with the same node operators on all the networks? Or do they try to have different selection of node operators depending on the network to try to mitigate potential correlation slashing? Not all node operators will be equally performant as well. So there might be node operators that are very performant on some SSN and others that are less performant on others. Does the node operator have a lot of concentration in a specific SSN network, which might cause some centralization concerns on some networks or not? So that's obviously the job of the curator, but for us delegating capital to multiple curators, we need to understand what is the curation type that they're doing and then provide additional diversification.
At a fundamental level, we're just trying to build at Cork the infrastructure that allows all of these different things to be priced. And so if you have a vault that's allocating to specific node operators, you can actually price that node operator's risk. If you're allocating to a group of AVSs or an LRT, you can price it at each individual level and just give the market the tool set to actually start to create risk markets for this, and then ultimately that can get packaged into things that look much more like traditional financial structured products that provide reinsurance and different levels of capital with tranching and all sorts of other fun stuff, but sort of has to start at this like core fundamental level at first.
As a curator, the way we select the node validator, so yeah, there is the concept, then there is the practicality. So you have around 85 node operators, I think, that are listed more or less on Symbiotic. 6 months ago, there were a number of 30. So us, we are not node validator, but we have to delegate to them. So I needed to talk to a lot of node operators during those last 6 months. So first, I looked at cohort 0, which is the node validator that was in the test net of Symbiotic. You know all them. You have P2P, Luganode, Chorus Noir, DSRV, Node Infra. I need to name more, otherwise they will think I do some and Blockscape, etc. You have a lot, okay? And so at the beginning is to work with the one that has been the closest to Symbiotic team. I think in the future, more and more node validator will come, but I think their knowledge will be a little bit lower than the one that is working on restaking right now. What happened with the node validator, how do we select them, is, okay, so everything that what you mentioned, so the historical data, the track record, how many slashing did they occur during POS, and then basically we study node validator one by one by giving a use case of SSN. And then depending on the answer of each node validator, first we have a good overview of what node validator think, then we start picking which one has been the most thorough in the analysis. I think in the future you will have thematic, meaning that some node validator will become experts into one family of AVS. Right now it's so small that there is only like 10, 20 SSN, so that every big node validator can, for now, acknowledge each of them. Yeah. So just a shortcut to answer is we work with the node validator that has been the most proactive in restaking through Eigenlayer and Symbiotic so far.
For lending markets, I guess we don't work directly with node operators, so don't need to choose them. But actually, it's another dimension of data to assess risks of underlying LRTs. Yeah. So when we check in different LRTs, what kind of node operators they are working on, and data on like even for validation of different services, I guess it's also like valuable data to understand the risk, because it could show the how much technical team, how they're good on DevOps and etc. Yeah, so.
Awesome, sounds good. I think we have a lot of node operators and they have very good expertise in validating these networks and AVSs. And we are well equipped and we are still early. We need to figure out how node operators work, so yeah. If you guys had to choose one, maximize the number of AVSs or doubling down to maximize yield of one AVS, what would you choose?
I would maximize the number because this gives you more diverse risk profile, and I think it's the only way to work with the risk management with the AVSs.
Yes, same. I will also diversify.
Consensus here, I guess.
Same.
Same, because it's cumulative. Why do you want to double down on one, since actually you can secure two at the same time? So the yield is cumulative. So
We are still degen industry, so
yes.
we need to choose
Yeah.
every
This is a
existing
degen industry.
AVSs. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. This is a degen industry.
But keep the correlation low.
Yes, you need to keep the correlation low.
Or just keep praying.
Or just find another way to hedge out the risk.
Maybe let me turn the question a little bit. So in restaking, you have that concept of staking ratio, right? Where you have, let's say, 1 million, 10 networks. So do you want to provide 10 times 1 million and providing 10 million economic security, meaning that your restaking ratio is like 10x. So will you maximize the staking ratio, or is there any reason why you will not like to maximize the staking ratio as a curator?
I'm happy to maximize it until slashing is live.
Yeah, then I think it ends up starting to look like something like an efficient frontier, where you have what is the actual like risk-adjusted return that you're providing, where if you could actually end up getting slashed massively where everything goes to zero because of the way that you're set up, what is the return that you're getting for that?
Yeah, the tricky part about risk-adjusted returns is in TradFi we have the concept of volatility. Slashing has in itself no volatility. It has maybe a value at risk. What is the maximum loss that you can get, right? What is the probability you can actually get that maximum loss or not? So, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like an efficient frontier. It's like I mean, there's like all sorts of new concepts that are being developed here that have no exact corollary in traditional finance, but the way in which you can actually try to mitigate and price and hedge the risks of them do have corollaries.
I guess right now it's number of AVSs is too low. It's kind of like a credit portfolio. If you try to understand risk of giving credit for some specific person, we can do that. But if there is like thousands, 10,000s of similar people with similar profile, in that case you can assess the risk and build some scoring model, etc. So it's too early. We need more AVSs.
Okay, we need more AVSs. Okay, I won't take too long, and let's take one last question. Quick prediction, what will be the biggest headline in the next 12 months in the restaking ecosystem?
I think it's the first slashing. It's easy.
I was about to say the same, actually.
Yeah, I think there was like a huge headline when Lido experienced its first slashing event, right? And so when an LRT has an event or anything has an event where there's an actual slashing event that is real and substantial, not just like, oh yeah, one ETH was slashed and it's covered by a buffer fund. When it actually affects the price of something, that's when you're going to see a real headline.
Yeah, Lido v3, so August 2025. Lido v3, it's going to be big, I think. And Catalysis release, so it's going to be big.
Yeah, Catalysis for the win.
More AVSs, more AVSs.
Yeah, we need more IVS, yes, I agree.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you to all the panelists here. And yeah, restaking is the future, but it needs to be built right, and all of us are here to do it. Thank you.